Here we are for another round of the 70s versus the 90s, and it's an ape of a round when I put Franklin J. Schaffner's Planet of the Apes against Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes. And this one was interesting to get through because so in this we're doing original versus remake. We really won't talk much about the plot because they're basically the same thing on both of them. You know, they're both adapted from a book. I haven't read the book, so this isn't going to be which one is more faithful to the source material. It's going to be which one works better as a movie, you know. So first up, we have Franklin J. Schaffner's Planet of the Apes, which stars Charlton Heston. And this was a pivotal moment in Charlton Heston's career because this was kind of his transition from doing like westerns and biblical and historical epics to doing sci-fi, because after Planet of the Apes he had like a whole string of sci-fi films after it, stuff like the Omega Man and Soylent Green, amongst many other, you know, wild outlandish shit that he did. But he's an astronaut, and him and his crew, which consists of two other men and a woman, they're on a mission to go find some like far off world or some shit, and they're way into the future. Like most of the people that sent them on their mission are dead, and you know nobody's gonna know who the fuck they are, type thing. And then so they basically end up crash landing on this planet. The woman dies in the little fucking stasis sleep thing. There's like a leak in the thing or whatever the fuck. So it's just these three dudes trying to find their way through the desert and stuff. And then, you know, they find a watering hole and they swim around in it. But then like some natives steal their clothes. And then like as they're rushing around, you know, looking at the natives thinking, oh, we could be running this place. And all of a sudden there's fucking like apes on horses hunting the humans and shit. And then like just that reveal is one of the most like nightmarish things ever like put into the cinema. And the film itself does feel like a nightmare, especially accentuated by the brilliant score by the great Jerry Goldsmith. His music is so haunting and it's so perfectly put and paced with the film and stuff. It definitely helps it move along, you know, because a great film score doesn't necessarily need to be iconic, but it does need to accentuate what's going on in the film and create a mood. That's what really a great film score should be. And so once they're captured by the apes, you know, Charlton Heston gets shot in the throat so he can't talk at first, because that's the thing about the humans on this planet. They don't talk. They're essentially the animals, and then the apes are talking, and you know they're civilized. You know, they got a whole society and stuff, and you know they got a religion. They got all, you know, it's basically no different than humans, you know, and that is perfectly accentuated in throughout the whole film, especially when that Taylor, Charlton Heston's character, gets to talking, and then you know it just throws up the fucking, you know, no pun intended, but a monkey wrench in their whole program and stuff. So and then you know Zira, played by Kim Hunter, is, you know, the one ape that's not full of shit. You know, she's trying, you know, all in the name of science and stuff. And the makeup effects for this one is just simply brilliant. Definitely very ahead of its time as far as, you know, for 1968 when this film was released. You know, this was very innovative special effects work. You know, just absolutely brilliant, because it, you know, they look, and they had the acting in it too. You also have Roddy McDowall, Maurice Evans, and they're really playing it like apes. You know, it's very, and is, you know, still being human, you know, and it's very chilling, very nightmarish and stuff. And there's great moments, some of the most iconic moments in like cinema history, like when they're, you know, Charlton Heston's on the run and they capture, he's like, "Take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape." That shit, there's that reveal too, is almost as intense as when he sees the apes for the first time and shit. And of course, like Dr. Zayas, played by Maurice Evans, you know, he's the, you know, the minister of science and stuff, and the protector of the faith and all this shit. So he's covering up, you know, he lobotomized Landon, who was one of Charlton Heston's crew, because, you know, mutant, you can't have mutants running around, you can't have nothing to, you know, destroy the established order. So like they're very profound shit, you know, definitely a mirror for society and shit. You know, people that don't like evolution, you find out these fucking apes are no different than humans. You know, at the beginning of the film, Charlton Heston's like, you know, I hope there's just better life out there, you know, and there's not, you know. And but this movie also has one of the greatest endings of all time, because that reveal at the end when he sees the fucking Statue of Liberty in the sand, and he just, you know, realizes like he's back on Earth, only they fucking just blew the motherfucker up with nuclear war and shit. And that whole "God damn you all out." That's what, because Dr. Zayas warns him, "Don't look for it, Taylor. You may not like what you find." You know, it's just absolutely brilliant, you know, and the film is filled with like quotable lines. Like, you know, I'd kiss you, but you're so damned ugly. You know, it's just fucking brilliant. And of course, it was co-written by Rod Serling too. So, you know, that's where the nightmarish quality comes into play. And, you know, like this, the whole film just plays like a living nightmare. And then we have Tim Burton's remake of Planet of the Apes, which centers around Mark Wahlberg, which feels like more of a nightmare just because that's how shitty it is. You know, it doesn't evoke that mood. You know, it definitely this time. You know, Mark Wahlberg, he's also an astronaut, but here he's on a space station, and they're training apes as basically the canaries to go into like these uncharted worlds. And if it's safe for the apes, then it's safe for the humans type shit. But one of the apes that they send off gets caught in some wormhole of shit. So Mark Wahlberg, being the fucking hotshot that he is, you know, just wants to jump in and save the apes. And then he ends up in the wormhole, you know, way into the future in some fucking alternate world where it's apes and shit. But their reveal for that is not as like intense as, you know, and I guess it could be the fact that you already know what's gonna happen type thing, but it just has more of a silly quality than the original one does, where the original one you really felt a sense of danger. You know, the thing about Mark Wahlberg, though, he's definitely not the actor that Charlton Heston was, but one thing that he does have on Charlton Heston, he's really good at playing confused, you know, and I don't know if that's just naturally Mark Wahlberg, you know, just confused as fuck as to what's going on. But the supporting cast of the actors they got to play the apes, though, might be better than the original one, because you got Tim Roth as General Thade, who's like the kind of the villain in the, he kind of serves for like all the asshole apes of the original one, because like he's basically Dr. Zaius combined with like, you know, just some, you know, tyrant asshole, you know. And you got Michael Clark Duncan as his lieutenant, and Paul Giamatti is like a slave trader, and Helena Bonham Carter is basically the role that the Dr. Zira is in the original one. You know, she's the one that's sympathetic to the humans, and is a weird kind of like interspecies erotica thing going on in this one too. They play that up more than the original. Like it's definitely a lot trashier than the original, because the original, like, there was sexual innuendo in it. You know, you also said I saw more nude male ass in the original than you definitely see in this one. But you know, this one's more concerned about like the apes fucking, and then you kind of see Helena Bonham Carter's character kind of like, you know, slightly aroused by Mark Wahlberg in the movie, which is kind of weird and disturbing and shit. And really, you had the humans talk in this one too, which I thought was a weird choice. The thing about this one, it does what a lot of remakes do, is they just kind of do the exact opposite of what was iconic about the original one. So like the humans talk in it, and the iconic Charlton Heston line, "Take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape." Michael Clark Duncan says it, but it's a, "Take your hands off me, you damn dirty human," and it's just fucking lame as shit, you know. And then of course they have a bit of stunt casting in it. They have Charlton Heston comes back as General Thade's father, and he uses his "damn them all to hell." It's just blatantly fucking dumb, you know. But you would think too that Tim Burton, being kind of a guy that does nightmarish type movies, that he could have captured the nightmare essence a lot better, but instead it's just fucking silly. It kind of feels like it feels so bad. It feels like Ron Howard directed it, you know, because it was kind of around the same time as that fucking Grinch movie, and it kind of has that feel. We get a lot more shit that nobody asked for this movie, because I mean the original was pretty perfect, you know, and then of course like where you had like, it was more intriguing when the humans didn't talk, because it was so much more shocking when Charlton Heston does talk, and it makes him seem more unique. Whereas like just from the get-go, Mark Wahlberg, they're just, oh, he's different than most of these humans, you know. And it just doesn't really play. You get more into ape politics too, you know, because that was another thing that I guess those Star Wars prequels around that time kind of fucked up, because, you know, who the fuck really cares about politics? There's a way to fucking insert that into the film, you know, subtextually, and the original one did that brilliantly. You know, it's kind of an indictment on society and how fucked up shit is, because that's the only way you could really criticize anything in society. It either had to be a horror film or science fiction or fucking satire comedy. You know, you couldn't just come out and say it outright and shit. And of course, you know, there's always, you know, unrequited love between the Tim Roth character, but like he's fucking brilliant in this, but it just gets so dumb, especially that fucking ending where it's like you have like this human uprising, they fight the apes, but then the one ape comes back that Wahlberg was training and stuff, and they think he's the god, but it really turns out like, you know, they were trying to fucking come rescue him. They end up crash landing, and then the apes basically create all that shit. They evolve, reverse evolution or whatever the fuck you want to call it. And then he goes back to through time to Earth. But then it's like now that's overrun with apes. The Lincoln Memorial is now General Thade, and it's just what the fuck. I don't know what fucking writer thought that was brilliant. I don't know what fucking idiot approved that either. But it's just so blatantly done to be different and shocking than the original that it just falls flatter than a fucking pancake. So this round clearly has to go to the original Planet of the Apes. Franklin J. Schaffner's brilliant adaptation of that. One, because Charlton Heston's just way fucking better than Mark Wahlberg. And two, nothing beats that ending. That is one of the most shocking and surprise endings that the whole time he's on Earth. That fucking shit with the wormhole stuff in the remake. It's just trying to be more brilliant than you fucking are, and you end up sounding more fucking dumb. The only thing that I think the remake has on the original is like the apes themselves. The actors playing the apes might be better, but that's still just 1 point against many others against it. Because even Danny Elfman's score can't hold a flickering birthday candle to Jerry Goldsmith's nightmarish score. Because they try to be all fucking like hard rock fucking thing, which is fair, given Danny Elfman's background, but it doesn't really do anything to fucking add a sinister layer to the fucking film, And like I said, it's a lot more trashier too, The original Planet of the Apes is very respected. It's a solid piece of science fiction filmmaking, definitely a staple of that time period, and still one of the most iconic and influential films of all time. So for anybody keeping score, that is 69-57. 70s are back up by 12. They broke the 90s 4-film streak, and so who knows? This is definitely a fucking on and off again fucking fisticuffs right here. So if I've said anything wrong, anything you disagree with, feel free to eviscerate me in the comments. It's just one asshole's opinion, If you got any suggestions, feel free to fucking add those in there. And any film professors that want to use this shit, we got to talk compensation, because nobody works for free, or make your own fucking theories type thing. And, so definitely stay tuned for more of these. I'll do them as they come and as I got time. So, cause I got to know. I got at least 6 pages of these, and this is one intense fucking academic, scientific study, whatever the fuck you want to call it. But self-indulgent would probably be more apt term.